Welcome everybody to our next broadcast of Knowledge as a Service series, where we provide technical experts to our customers and discuss interesting topics and emerging technologies that might help your organization and maybe that you were curious about. I'm Shannon Youngwater, Director of Technology for Mobius Partners, and I've been working on technology solutions with clients for over 20 years, primarily with a focus and networking and security. But I'm also joined by my colleague, Kai Houston. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Shannon. Hi, everybody. I also am kind of an old school techie. I've been in the industry for probably getting close to 30 years now, but I've worked in a majority of roles or a plurality of roles where I've been in customer, vendor, and partner, and I think I enjoy the partner aspect the most.
Yeah, I agree. I like the ability that we get to go out and work and see a lot of different environments and get exposed to a lot of different, approaches and technologies as part of that, which is, one of the things that I think makes Mobius Partners valuable to our customers. For those of you new with us, Mobius Partners is a local solution provider in your backyard, but we have a global reach, helping our clients with their journey across the ever-changing landscape of IT. And today we're here to talk with you about cybersecurity mesh architecture, or CSMA, as we'll call it, to make it brief and add to our acronym soup that we all work with in technology. Gartner expects CSMA to be a focus of successful digital enterprises in the next 2 to 3 years. The cost of security breaches is real and tangible now. Before, being hacked was seen more as of a possible threat that was manageable with some investment, kind of like an insurance equation. You spend enough to protect enough. But the use of ransomware and automated hacking tools to monetize those hacking efforts has really changed the equation. Hacking used to be just for prestige of that, malevolent actor, and so they could go brag to their other, online friends that, look what I did, and I wrote my name across somebody's website. That was enough motivation for them. But now they can make money selling data on the dark web. They can make money extorting your company to not release your data. Or they can make money by making you pay just to get access back to your own data. So this profit motive that has monetized security attacks really has changed the economics of security. And to put it to numbers, they're expecting that organizations that adopt a CSMA approach will reduce the financial impact of security incidents by 90%. And the average cost of a security incident, it's measured starting with 7 digits. So these are significant dollars that affect your company's bottom line. And, obviously it's the reason why all of us have jobs in the IT industry. But IT organizations tend to view their environment as silos that need protecting, networking, servers, databases, storage, identity management, etc. But hackers, they don't think this way, and they don't care about how your company has created your teams. They see one big shiny attack surface, and they only need one way, and they don't care which way it is to get in. So what are those forces that are pushing us to change our approach in security? Obviously, top of list is going to be the advent of private, public, hybrid, and multi-cloud strategy. Everybody is using cloud services to some extent. So just think about the adoption of Office 365 or Salesforce. Those are all out there being used. Kyle, you're obviously focused in cloudy technologies. For your customers that you work with, describe what their cloud strategies are like these days.
Yeah, so cloud strategies, it's ever evolving, right? As more people kind of understand or kind of get a common understanding of what cloud is, because everybody still sort of has their own idea of what a cloud is. Really what it boils down to is not really caring where the application resides at the end of the day. Your end users don't care as long as it's running, right? So whether you're building a cloud on-prem or you're using the public cloud for, financial reasons, whether you want to do OpEx as opposed to CapEx. And a lot of people are actually saying that, hey, hybrid is probably the best approach because the stuff that's in-house needs to stay in-house for whether it's security reasons or performance reasons. But we could save maybe some money by shifting other workloads to the cloud, or even using software as a service where they're not even owning the infrastructure, whether it's on-prem or in the public cloud. So there is quite a shift in how people are seeing it, going from cloud first to cloud only to cloud smart. And everybody kind of has their own way of doing things. But I think you make an extremely valuable point, is that, we all have heard about this is how you kind of do security when you own this stuff, but how are we going to do security? Do we just trust that they're doing the right things out there, or are there tools that we can do to verify that? So I do have a question though. I mean, you talked about ransomware, and that is a huge thing, right? Tons of money is shifting hands right now because of ransomware. But is that strictly what CSMA is for? And is that the problem that it solves?
Well, that is certainly a big one. Obviously, ransomware is in the headlines a lot these days, and that is one of the biggest forces in the economics of security. But it's not just ransomware. There are all sorts of what we call persistent threats, right, existing in environments. Obviously, there's still things like social engineering and phishing that are going on to get into enterprises and take advantage of them. So for sure, ransomware is top of mind for everybody these days. But it obviously includes so much more than that. And right, the list isn't getting shorter. Unfortunately, the list is getting longer. Another one of those forces that are pushing this to change, the change in approach to security for CSMA is BYOD, which you don't really hear people talking about much anymore. Why? Did it go away? No, obviously it didn't go away. It's because it's become the norm, right? So people don't even, it's not even its own topic anymore. How many people do you know not getting their email on their cell phone that they went and picked out themselves, they purchased it, they pay for the monthly service. And so you also have that same thing with laptops. So a major percentage of work is getting done on devices not even owned by the organization, and maybe not even managed by the organization. Kyle, how many different devices do you use to work in some capacity? I know for me, it's at least 3 that I'm using on a regular basis.
3, sometimes 4. Yep.
Yeah, so that proliferation of devices and not owned and managed by the company has definitely been a big change. And remote access has always been a factor, but work from home initiatives that were thought to be temporary responses to the pandemic, have really taken hold and stayed with us. So our mode of working is different and has changed pretty significantly and quickly over the last 2 or 3 years. So that has definitely been a big difference. And what that has taught us is that there is no edge to your network. The edge has become blurry and very hard to define. Really, the edge of your network is wherever your data sits, and it's also where your employees are sitting accessing that data, whether they're at home or sitting in a coffee shop somewhere. So that is now the edge of your network. And then there's also been a shift in philosophy for DevOps, right? Shift left to have security starting early on in the process and to be integrated as part of the development process itself, because obviously a lot of hacks come through software defects and bugs. So that has also been a key trigger for the need for automation and integration of security tools. And so what CSMA really is a change in strategy and philosophy to how you accomplish data security. It isn't a new technology that you go out and buy, like a network sensor or a security application. Security started with a focus on endpoints and the network edge, but needs to shift to centralized administration of data, but with decentralized policy enforcement. So ultimately, your data needs the protection, not the devices themselves. This means refocusing attention on identity and context. And reality is that the assumption now is that you will have a security breach. Right? The question isn't if, it is when. And more importantly, the question is how long will it take for you to detect the breach and contain it? In security, we refer to that as dwell time. And while the numbers vary from source to source, the average time to detect a security incident is in the range of 200 and something days. That's 6 to 9 months before an organization discovers the incident and begins responding to try to contain it and lock out their malevolent actors that have, gotten in, and then also trying to figure out, what happened while they were there, what did they lose, and that takes a lot of additional time and cost to deal with that. And we've seen this many times with headline grabbing incidents like, Yahoo and Home Depot and Target and Colonial Pipeline, right? So some of these folks, were exposed for months and months and months without knowing it, while there was exfiltration of data going on, and sometimes, having their operations shut down, like in the case of Colonial Pipeline. So it is a real impact to businesses.
So I have a question for you, Shannon. So in the security space, there are many different pillars to have to watch out for, right? Whether it's physical security, end user knowledge that they need to know so they can, prevent being susceptible to phishing attacks and training and all that stuff. At the same time, there's all the, firewalls, intrusion detections and the like. But this sounds more like it's a way of doing security, but not a specific piece of technology. Or is it just, trying to build, a better SIM that handles context better?
Okay, so SIM is definitely an important tool in the portfolio that a customer has to have. But it is not about buying any of those individual, pieces and parts to bolt on. What CSMA is really about is it gives us 5 tenets to work with that we can respond with in IT to this new reality of security. And the very first of those, and arguably the most important, is that everything that you're putting in now must be API driven to allow for integration. So that is key to making it all happen. This allows your ecosystem of technologies to communicate and integrate, which allows your IT staff to interact with fewer tools. And this, goes back to our discussion earlier about, the public, private, hybrid, multi-cloud, right? These are all different areas, all with different services and applications. And you need tools and services that are API driven to allow this integration and for things to happen. And the second tenet in going back to the SIM is you need strong analytics and intelligence. If you aren't collecting the data and analyzing it, then you're almost doing nothing. And of course, SIM tools are all about that. That's what they can provide, but it's so much more than that. Everything is a potential source of security information, especially what we like to call indicators of compromise. It's applying the approach of big data to security. And next, also, we have distributed identity management, because it's no longer about just having Microsoft Active Directory running in your data center, right? We have federation, we have single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and cloud strategies have rendered that nearly impossible to have a single approach to authentication. Another one is consolidated policy management. So while we need security across multiple tools and environments, the policies controlling access shouldn't change or be different. So you need a way to bring them all together into a single policy management system to make those available across the different tools that you're going to be utilizing in your environment. And then also finally is enriched dashboards. If you don't have analytics feeding dashboards that can be viewable across your IT organization, then you don't really have a chance to respond to security incidents in a timely manner. And as we talked about the numbers earlier, it obviously isn't happening in a timely manner. Even with organizations that have brought a lot of resources to bear, to that problem. And the major technology manufacturers, have responded with offerings to address this need and this approach. It does not mean you have to choose a single solution provider for your, let's call it enterprise security fabric. There definitely are some benefits in doing so. But again, with a focus on API-enabled tools, it isn't required. And probably more importantly, there isn't a single manufacturer provider that can do everything the best. They're all going to have gaps that you need to fill. And that's why it's so important to have those API enabled tools to make that all happen. So this is probably making our listeners, trigger a lot of questions and might have you thinking, but what do I do? Where do I start? I'm suggesting that your approach should probably be thinking about your security operations center, right? Your SOC, as we call it. And most larger organizations have an actual security operations center, although the maturity and effectiveness varies a lot. But smaller companies do not, which, primarily based on differences in scale and size of staffing, for them, it's not realistic. So if you think about a SOC, how do I get alerts? And how does my organization respond to those alerts? This gets you to start thinking about tooling integration. And that's why it can be a very effective way to start approaching this concept of CSMA. And I know a lot of our listeners may be thinking, but I don't have a SOC. Not everybody can just go out and hire 7 people to sit in a SOC and respond to indicators of compromise. Because on average, you need 7 people to cover a 24/7 shift when you include things like clock time, vacation, sick days, training, all that stuff. Well, and we're all interconnected now globally. And so your time zone doesn't matter to hackers. Security is not a daytime business hours function. It is 24/7, and it has to be diligent, and it has to be always ongoing. But an organization can get a SOC capability without building it internally. So managed services isn't anything new to us. Perhaps the MSP you work with can already provide that additionally to you. So you can be talking to them about providing that to you in some way. Also, SOC as a service is an actual thing now. So you could look into that for your organization. And if your MSP isn't able or willing to interact with your need for a SOC, then you probably should be looking for one that will. And of course, we're here to help as well. You need a technology collaborator like Mobius Partners to help you establish strategy and to execute on that and make that transition. So that's it's important to not try to take everything on yourself, and find those trusted advisors that can help you navigate these troubled waters that we're now steering in these days. Okay, so thanks for your time. I hope you heard some useful information today. I'll wrap things up here and open up for any questions that you have. You can also reach out to us at info@mobiuspartners.com. And you'll also get an invitation to our next Knowledge as a Service podcast, where we'll talk about passwordless authentication. And yes, that's a real thing now, passwordless authentication. And also, thanks to my partner, Kyle, for joining. Do we have any questions sitting out there in the queue?
There is one question. I think you did touch on it pretty good, but maybe we can kind of give a specific, right? If you have if you can give any organization one call to action on where to get started, what would it be?
Yeah, for sure. It would be with that focus on your SOC, your Security Operations Center, which again, it doesn't mean you have a building with a room, that looks like, the DEF CON, war rooms that we see on TV, which actually, it is that way for some of the large organizations who have very security sensitive environments.
I worked for some.
Yeah, and some are pretty impressive. I've worked for one and I've done tours of them, and they're certainly impressive. But that's the reality is that not everyone's going to get that kind of SOC. But the SOC as a service allows someone else to build that, and you just are paying for a slice of it, economically in a way. But it's SOC is also it is of itself a methodology and philosophy. So it's not just about a guy sitting in a chair staring at this screen. So if you haven't had discussions in your IT organization and with your executive management about how you accomplish SOC, then that's definitely a big missing part of the conversation equation. And again, once you start thinking about that, that's when you start looking at how my tools are bringing those things together And to do that, right, then it has to be API driven. So like now those tenants that we were talking about for a cybersecurity architecture, all those things start to flow on one after the other.
Yeah. And to me, the one call to action would be to, reach out to us or, your trusted security professionals to have discussions around where you might have some lacking in this space, and if this is the right, CSMA, my getting tongue twisted here. CSMA is sort of the right path for you, and how you can get started, because everybody's going to be slightly different in implementation. So I would definitely reach out to us or your trusted security advisor.
Yeah, and it's always important to have trusted partners to work with, because the reality is technology and security is so wide now, it touches everything. You just can't have an expert in everything, right? As much as we would all like our teams and our organizations to be built that way, to have an expert in everything, it's not realistic that you're going to be able to accomplish that. So you probably have gaps in skills also, which has been a challenge for organizations in the past 5 years, is that there just aren't enough people in the security realm to hire and fill these positions. And even then, when you work internal to an organization, right, your exposure to different things going on becomes more limited, right? And to some extent, maybe you operate a little bit with blinders on. And so that is one of the values that working with technology partners provides, is we are seeing what other people are doing. We've seen what works, we've seen what doesn't work, which is different for every organization. So that is always a strong recommendation, is to make sure that you will have a trusted technology partner to help you through these things.
Indeed. I don't see any other questions out there, so I think it's probably safe to wrap up. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We will make sure that this gets posted to our podcast, as well as we'll link it out in LinkedIn. And thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thanks everybody, and I hope you join us for our next one, which again is going to be passwordless authentication for our Knowledge as a Service podcast. And of course, again, reach out to us at info@wellbeespartners.com if you want more. And with that, we will bring it to a close. Thanks everybody. We appreciate your time with joining us.